My guest today, watchman on the wall, out there trying to awaken the slumbering masses, been writing articles, News with Views, for 10 years, trying to get this message out of the fourth branch of government and how, well, we've forgotten all about it. What is this fourth branch of government? My guest today, Dr. Edwin Vieira, I welcome him back, and just a wealth of information. Dr. Vieira, welcome.
My pleasure to be with you, Randy.
So, Monday we had an anniversary, and so as I'm talking to people, I wish them a happy anniversary of 800 years ago. Something took place last Monday, and I bet you know what it was.
It was the Magna Carta, the first version of the Magna Carta.
Yes. And that's another thing that has totally, well, evaporated from the social fabric out there, the teaching, the education. That, that was 800 years ago. How would that have anything to do with me today?
Well, you don't have to go back 800 years to find things that have evaporated from social consciousness. You can go back to 1776, the Declaration of Independence. You can go back to 1787 and the Constitution. You can go back to 1792 and the Bill of Rights, although some of them still apparently have resonance or relevance in the popular mind. There's a great deal that's been lost simply because the public educational system primarily and the mass media especially have been manipulated to essentially suppress knowledge of those events or those documents, really. And there's a reason for that, because those documents stand in direct contradiction to a political trend, or I would call it, to describe it better, as a political conspiracy that's been being run in this country for quite some time, and is certainly in control of Washington, D.C., and quite a few of the state capitals as well.
Most of the state capitals. And that all trickles down even to the little burg and their, city council.
Right, city council, county council, so forth and so on, because they tend to be made up of people who are part of the political mainstream within the so-called two-party system. Of course, two-party system has its own narrative of what our political structure is supposed to be, and that narrative is quite diverse in the sense of its disconnection to constitutional principles. So it all sort of works in the same direction. I mean, we're on a political treadmill, and it functions in only one way. But this eventually comes back to the fact that the great mass of people in this country who are, and you said the fourth branch of government, they are the first branch of government. We the people, and this is a system of popular sovereignty. Everything else depends upon us, as opposed to the opposite, which is presented to us out of Washington and the state capitals, that everything depends upon them. And there's our difficulty, that the people who are supposed to be functioning in the leadership role, the controlling aspect of this system, are, for whatever reason, there are a number of different explanations, they're sitting on their hands and watching, Oprah reruns or whatever it is on the telly, as opposed to performing some basic functions, without which we cannot maintain the political system, which in many aspects originally derives from 1215, the date of the Magna Carta, the concept of due process. All right.
Well, here we are, right here, and probably some of the listeners have read this, but vestment of political power. All political power is vested in and derived from the people. All government of right originates from the people, is founded upon their will only, and is instituted solely for the good of the whole. Mm-hmm. Article 2, Section 1 of the Colorado Constitution.
Yeah, I'm sure, and you'll find that principle stated, especially if you go back to the original 13 colonies, original 13 states. You will find that stated over and over again in various documents, in terms of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution, in terms of bills of rights that were written for the state constitutions when they took up their own governmental authority. and that principle goes back. I mean, you can find that principle even in Blackstone and the early English law, Anglo-American law, that applied to the colony.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's something that is no longer current, is it?
Well, it's current, just nobody knows how to take it by the neck and use it. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings and to his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation under Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the left behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
My guest today, Dr. Edwin Vieira. You can find his articles at newswithviews.com. Newswithviews.com. His book's available at Amazon.com. Just when you go to Amazon, type in Edwin Vieira, V-I-E-I-R-A, Edwin Vieira. That'll bring his books up. A wealth of information you need to study and get up on this for the, reestablishment of the first branch of government. I was wrong there. That, yes, the militia, and it is mentioned 4 times in the Constitution. So it must have had an important role. It must have meant to the rioters of the Constitution that the militia was a integral part of this government that they were forming.
Well,
and it was back then, wasn't it?
Indispensable. If you look at the first 13 words of the Second Amendment, which unfortunately most proponents of gun rights leave aside, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. And that tells you, emphasizes, that the goal of the entire constitutional structure, the goal of the Declaration of Independence as well, is this thing called a free state. Not a police state, not a totalitarian state, not a socialist state, not a whatever, put your other adjectives in there, but a free state. Now, a free state is one, by definition, that is controlled by popular sovereignty. Popular self-government is the mechanism by which popular sovereignty exercises that control. And, of course, we have the principle that if you have popular sovereignty, the highest level of political control, political power, is in the hands of the people. And then there is, on the other side, the practical principle, all political power goes out of the barrel of a gun. Now, that's actually what the Second Amendment says, at least with respect to a free state, when it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Why? Because a well-regulated militia is composed of who? Well, of the people themselves, essentially everyone from 15 to 16 years of age on up until you become too debilitated to perform any function. And the people controlling that kind of force, the ultimate force in society, will be the ones who control political power. They exercise political power, and that's the essence of popular sovereignty. So if you want to maintain this system against the real vicissitudes, the real challenges, the real dangers, the real threats, whatever word you want to use, to a free state, then you have to maintain a well-regulated militia. And this is our problem today. It is not accidental that as we see our political system deviating more and more from any rational conception of a free state, we have to say, well, what's the ultimate reason? Well, the ultimate reason is because we're not following this basic principle in the Constitution. We do not have well-regulated militia in any of the 50 states. And so it's not surprising, as a consequence of that absence, that there will be an absence of the other thing. The absence of the militia implies the absence of a free state. We don't have a militia, and we see the free state being dismantled at an ever-increasing pace.
Yes. The states have become mere political subdivisions of the Washington District of Criminals.
Well, that's correct. And the Washington District of Criminals, if it were following the constitutional principles, would also be subject or have a deep involvement with the militia, because the original Constitution, dealing with Congress and the President and the courts, of course, has specific provisions for which, in which the Constitution, in which the militia play a vital role. So we see it at both levels. Now, I don't blame Washington entirely for the absence of the militia. There's a lot of blame that can be attributed to the states as well. But the only way this thing is ever going to be reversed is from the local and state level up, because ultimately, as the Constitution points out, the militia are not entities of that government in Washington, D.C.
Right.
They are state institutions. And why are they state institutions? Well, because that makes them as close to the people as possible. We have local participation, ultimately local control, and of course the states are integral to the entire federal system. We could have the states without the federal system, but we couldn't have the federal system without the states. So if you look historically at this, it all fits together perfectly like a proper jigsaw puzzle. Difficulty is that over the years, the pieces of this puzzle have been scattered on the table for political reasons. There have been some dark political purposes behind this, and also because people in general have really not been willing to do the homework and the spade work necessary to maintain a militia structure. So there's enough guilt to be scattered around. It's not entirely the matter of something that happened in Washington, D.C., but it's not going to be corrected there. It's going to be corrected at the local and the state level. And ultimately, it's going to be corrected only by educating a sufficient number of people to demand what I call the revitalization of the militia. See, we don't have to, in a sense, reform them. We don't have to, in a sense, recreate them. They're there. The Constitution has already given us these things. They're an integral part of the system. They're not subject to control by Congress through statutes. They're not subject to being removed in some way by the states, because they're a constitutional entity, 50 of them, one in each state. But ultimately, it depends upon the people exercising their own power. These are popular institutions. And the people, if the people are not going to be, number one, prepared, which is an educational problem, and number two, determined to do it, it's not going to happen. And that means the free state will, as the Marxists say, wither away. It'll be taken away piece by piece, and they're doing it systematically. You can't look at what's going on in public affairs today without seeing the direction in which this whole system is going. And it's going there as a result of a plan. You have to face this. This is not accidental. They know what they're doing in Washington. They know what they're doing in quite a few of the state capitals. They have a plan. They have a goal. On our side, we have no plan. We have no goal. And that's the great difficulty. The Constitution is not a self-enforcing document. Right? It's not some kind of a robotic system. It's not mechanical. If we don't enforce it, it will not be enforced, and then something else will be enforced against us.
Yes. Well, we'll just be sitting back going, okay, silence is consent. And that's what's happening. The silence of the people is given consent to the beast to bring about whatever they decide they want to do.
Yeah, well, certainly as a practical matter, that's true. And I think that one of the problems that you have with the silence betokens consent theory is that the person who is silent knows what's going on, all right? If I know what's going on and I am silent about it, then you can presume that I'm consenting to the result. But what if I don't know what's going on? Or what if I'm being deceived affirmatively by these people? Then you cannot prove or presume that I'm consenting simply because I don't take action. My inaction may be the result of my being deceived. My inaction may be the result of my abysmal ignorance. And I think that's the real problem. We have those two coupled together. We have a very large amount of ignorance because people are not learning about American political principles, American political history, certainly in the public educational system. And then coupled with that, we have a very active disinformation, misinformation, false information campaign that's being put out by the political powers that be, coupled, of course, with the educational establishment and the mass media. And those two things in tandem, well, they're deadly, right? If people aren't getting the information on their own and they're being fed a pack of lies, what must the consequence be?
Well, the consequence will be that the powers that be will have their plan pushed down our throats.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and we see that, and that's what we see happening step by step, and it's been going at an accelerating pace certainly since the 9/11 event. You know, the Patriot Act and so forth and so on, all of which they had pre-planned, obviously. This was not something that was born in the year 2000. But the speed at which it's been accelerating is something that has certainly amazed me. I always thought that it would be a lot more incremental, the boiling of the frog principle, right? Well, they've turned up the heat, very, very quickly in this system.
Well, and they're impoverishing the people so that they don't have the resources to, fight back, to be able to say, oh, I'm going to take the next 2 weeks off or month off, and I'm going to just patrol the halls of the state capitol here, and, here's the introduction legislation to reestablish the militia, and just stay in the face of the legislators and say, here, I demand this. Put this forward, put whatever number bill you want on there, and I demand you reestablish this institution of the first branch of government.
Well, and people also don't have the time to do the necessary grassroots organizing, because obviously if I come alone to some state legislator, well, I'm potentially one vote or maybe 2 votes, number of people in my family. But if I come as the representative of a grassroots movement of hundreds of people, or maybe several thousand people in his legislative district, now he has to take me seriously.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about revitalization of the militia, you're talking about ultimately a movement that would need the organization of thousands of people within each state to perform the militia functions. Once again, that concept is not self-enforcing, right? It's not a machine that runs all by itself. It's a structure that depends upon people at the local level performing vital functions of security for a free state. And those might, in the gravest extreme, those might be of a quasi-military or military type. The Constitution tells us that one purpose of the militia is to repel invasions. It might deal with social unrest at a very high level. Another purpose that the Constitution mentions is to suppress insurrections. But it also might deal with the third great purpose of the militia, execute the laws. And we certainly need a great deal of that being done in this society, at least executing the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. So we have these functions that have to be performed. They have to be performed by individuals, have to be performed by large numbers of individuals. And that's another problem, is how do you organize significant numbers of individuals at the grassroots level when the other side has control of the print media, at least the major electronic media, when it is difficult without some kind of funding to put together large meetings of people for educational purposes, to put out publications of one kind or another, to set up websites even. A certain amount of money and skill has to be put into that. And the other side has essentially unlimited funding. Why? Well, of course, because they're tied back to the funny money system of central banking and fiat currency, which they very wisely got early in the game, right?
Yes.
This was something they were working on. I mean, you can go back to the National Bank, United States Bank, two United States banks. Well, that was in the early 1800s, right? So these people have gotten a jump start on us, and we're sort of playing catch-up in the last 2 minutes of the game.
And the score is 50 million to none.
Well, we're behind, but we're behind by a couple of touchdowns. I mean, in 2 minutes, you can do a fair amount of scoring. If you use the right strategy. I don't think that we're so far behind that we can't possibly win. I think people that say that, they have a word for those people, the catastrophards, right? It's a catastrophe, and there's nothing we can do. All right, you're a believer in the catastrophic approach to history, and I don't believe that, because ultimately the people make history. All right.
Yes.
So if we do nothing, obviously we lose. So what choice do we have? Well, it's obviously to do something, right? And we have to make the assumption that we have enough time, if we put in enough effort, to make a difference in this process. Certainly we don't want to throw up a hand and say, well, all is lost, and that's the end of that, and we have to go to the FEMA camps, whatever your vision is of this horrendous, non-free state.
Question, comment, 877-254-7524. We'll be right back.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188. Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
And we're back. Question, comment for my guest, Dr. Edwin Vieira. Phone lines are open, 877-254-7524. Question, comment. You can find Dr. Vieira's articles at newswithviews.com, newswithviews.com. His book's available at Amazon.com. Just type in Edwin Vieira, V-I-E-I-R-A. V-I-E-I-R-A, Edwin Vieira at Amazon. And get the books, folks. It's critical you learn about this and, well, have a good understanding of it so that you can go talk to your county commissioners and your sheriff and, well, educate the VFW and the American Legion and go to the Democratic and Republican county meetings and say, hey, this needs to be done. We need to do this here in Colorado. Turn off the television and get educated. Hey, and it's the mass media, Dr. Vieira, out there that as soon as the Department of Justice comes and says, give us all of your sources and your notes and everything on this story or that story, it's them that jump up and down and yell and scream First Amendment, Constitution, First Amendment, blah, blah, blah. But they won't educate the people on it, will they?
No, well, they have another agenda. I mean, they want to use the First Amendment for a certain set of purposes and not for the ultimate purpose to which it was originally directed. I mean, when you talk about free speech, what's the ultimate purpose of that? If you think of it in terms of, the Jeffersonian analysis, it was to provide people with the necessary truth, the necessary information, so that they could maintain a free society. And the difficulty with the mass media is, of course, they're putting out something that's quite contradictory of the principles of a free society. Now, they want the freedom to do that because they have this particular agenda, but they certainly don't want anyone else to exercise a contrary freedom, and that's why they conduct themselves as a kind of intellectual thought police, monopoly, or attempt to function that way, and suppress all contrary views. Now, they're having a difficult time, obviously, with the Internet, but they're working on that. I mean, they have people in Washington who are coming up with ideas, and internationally as well, for putting the same kind of control, the neck of the funnel phenomenon, if you will, on the Internet, because that's a very dangerous source of contradictory information. And you cannot run the opposite of a free state, a police state, totalitarian state, whatever word you want to use there. You cannot run that kind of a system without control over information. Make sure that the people are fed only the information that they're supposed to hear, that they're supposed to ingest, as it were, and act upon, and prevent any other ideas from reaching them.
Just as
it was Stalin. If you think about this, you think about some of the great dictators, great in the historical sense. I mean, it was Stalin who said, "We don't allow people to have guns. Why should we allow them to have free ideas? Ideas are much more dangerous than guns."
Yes.
And he was, of course, quite correct, because if you look at the Constitution and think of the ideas that are there, they lead you very quickly to the concept of the militia, the armed and organized people, right? So any first-class dictator is going to understand that those two amendments, or at least the principles that they embody, have to be suppressed. You certainly want to suppress the Second Amendment. You cannot let the people have control over the ultimate political force in society if you're going to maintain a central dictatorial-type system. And you certainly don't want them to have freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of thought, because once they start thinking on their own, it pretty quickly leads them to the concept of popular self-government. When people start thinking, well, what kind of government do I want? Well, it's a government in which I participate, in which I have some real controlling influence. And that's not a government made up of experts in Washington, D.C. It's a government that comes from the localities and works its way up in terms of, the direction of force. The real power in society is at the base of the pyramid, not at the all-seeing eye at the top. So, of course, you have to suppress those two basic freedoms. And that's what we see happening in this society. Yeah. Now, they have a difficulty because we have a society that many millions of people are armed. And there is that tradition. And it's the same with free speech. The average American recoils from the idea that someone is going to tell him what to say, or even worse, tell him what to think. Right? So they have a very difficult row to hoe here, but they're working at it.
Oh, they're working at it, and they're speeding it up, and we can't have the people reading this. Article 2, Section 2, people may alter or abolish form of government. Proviso, the people of this state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state, and to alter or abolish their constitution and form of government whenever they may deem it necessary to their safety and happiness, provided such change not be repugnant to the Constitution of the United States.
Right. And the Constitution of the United States, and actually of all of the states, is based upon the Declaration of Independence, which says the same thing.
Yes.
Right? So we go back that is the fundamental Constitution of the United States, and of all the states, is the Declaration of Independence. That's the foundational set of principles. And everything is built on that. And so we see in those early state constitutions, and we see, of course, in many, if not most, of the state constitutions that exist today, this reference back to those principles of the Declaration of Independence.
Yes, and
that's the thing. That's the document that these dark forces in Washington and in many of the state capitals really fear and abhor, is the Declaration of Independence.
And that has its roots and foundations from 800 years ago and Magna Carta.
In Magna Carta, that's right, exactly. You can go through the Middle Ages and find those principles, not just in Magna Carta. There are many other documents that recognize this concept. But maybe that's the reason that Monday was not celebrated to the extent it should have been celebrated in Washington, D.C. No, they don't want to hear about this basic concept of due process, because due process takes in all of these principles of fundamental law. Right? Due process of law. What kind of law? Well, the laws of nature and nature's God, to quote the Declaration of Independence. All right? That law. And that's the law they don't want to hear about, because that's the law that limits them and empowers the people, which is exactly the opposite picture that they are trying to promote.
Well, it's like, okay, people, just, we're up here looking out for your best interests. Just go back to sleep. Go back to sleep.
Yeah. That's right. Just keep that television on 24 hours a day. All right.
And tune in. I mean, here now we're being submitted, I'll get to that after the break. Question, comment, phone lines are open here on the American Freedom Network.
Square Root Construction is bleeding.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights media channel. You've noticed that there are few commercials on this radio network, and there's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on satellite, internet, or our various affiliates. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs on our Listen and Schedule pages. Then when you subscribe, we'll send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately and continue with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We ask you to give much less than a tithe so that you may also send support directly to a particular program, host, or cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
And we're back. Question, comment, phone lines are open for my guest, Dr. Edwin Vieira. You can find his articles at newswithviews.com, newswithviews.com. Books available at Amazon.com. Just type in Edwin, E-D-W-I-N, Vieira, V-I-E-I-R-A, V-I-E-I-R-A. You can also go to YouTube, and Dr. Vieira's got a whole bunch of videos up on YouTube, presentations he's made. That what I was getting ready to say is that we're going to be tortured now for the next 18 months on this supposed circus of a presidential election. I mean,
supposed is not, you shouldn't use that word. Circus is enough.
Okay.
It is a circus.
It is a circus. Okay.
Right? Barnum and Bailey has nothing on this.
Yes. And that's how they're going to occupy your minds and occupy your time, that you sit back and you say, well, I watched this on PBS and I watched this on the nightly news, and I'm all informed of what should happen here, and so I've done my part now.
Uh-huh. All right.
Yes.
And they've even brought out the clowns. You have Donald Trump threatening to run.
Yeah.
All right, so we have everything here. I mean, this is entertainment, political theater, if you will. All right,
yeah.
Slapstick comedy in a sense, except it isn't that funny in terms of, the national interest, in terms of the public interest. But where's the big money going? Where are the influential people lining up? Well, it's behind Hillary so far and Jeb Bush, the two anointed royal families.
Yes.
Because Hillary has a lot of baggage, and more of it is coming out. So, she may end up sinking. Although I think it's coming out now so that it will be old news in the middle of next year.
Yes.
Right? This is a let it all hang out theory. And then when we get to June, July of 2016, no one will be paying any attention to that anymore because, we heard that last year, and it's no longer relevant.
Yeah, we already told you about that, so don't worry about that.
So now listen to her plans for increasing health care and childhood education, all the rest of the stuff that she'll be putting out. Right? And the same with Jeb Bush. We're not going to be inundated with all the things he did while he was governor of Florida, or didn't do while he was governor of Florida, did wrongly while he was governor of Florida. So the media, they play these games, political psyops with us. But the problem is, for all of these candidates, the economic chickens are coming home to roost.
Yes.
And there's pretty much nothing they can do about that unless they were willing to become advocates of fundamental reforms in the monetary and banking systems, which they are not. So it should be very interesting to see the circumstances under which this 2016 election is going to be held. And, of course, you have foreign policy considerations coming in, too, with the attempt to browbeat the Russians and the Chinese, and on the other side, the Russians and the Chinese attempting to develop alternative monetary systems, alternative banking systems, alternative trade systems. And not just the Russians and the Chinese, but the so-called BRICS countries, a lot of these South American countries who have all sorts of reasons for being anti-American. And so they line up with a different economic bloc. And, of course, Hillary and Jeb and Donald Trump can't control any of those events either.
No. Well, they're going to control them to the point of that's, our the powers that be of the corporations have told us what we're supposed to say and do. So, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We really got to have this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which, well, let's see. No one can read it. No one can see it. Congressman, if you want to read it, you have to go down here in this little hidey-hole room with the guard, and you can't take a recorder or notes or a pen or write anything down, and you can't make any copies. No, can't have that. But pass it right now, pass it right through really quick because we got to have this.
And we'll find out what's in it after you pass it.
Yeah.
This is Nancy Pelosi's theory of legislation.
Absolutely.
We'll find out what's in the bill after we pass it.
And
we thought when she first said that, she was kind of a laughing stock for a while, right? But the principle apparently now has been ingrained in the system.
Well, and it's true. They didn't know what was in there. They had no clue.
No, but now but at the time we were laughing at it and saying, how stupid she was to say this. But now they're coming right out and not simply saying that they don't know, but they're not going to be allowed to know. See, the health care legislation, theoretically, those representatives and senators could have read the draft of the legislation before they voted on it, right?
Yes.
It wasn't secret. It wasn't kept in a box someplace. This thing, these trade deals, the essence of them is the secrecy.
Oh, absolutely. And one thing missing out of all this, in this, from what I understand, this trade deal is what's missing is Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa. Oh, the BRICS countries.
Yeah, and why don't you add Brazil? Add to Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela. We think of a lot of other countries.
Yes.
Right? They're going to be out of this and not going to want to participate in it, or will want to participate in some alternative system that the BRICS nations will be setting up. That's why I say the power structure in Washington, D.C. is still living in the past. They're living in the 1960s, 1970s, maybe 1980s, in which the monetary and financial and economic dominance of the West was clear. No longer, especially the monetary dominance. The world is going to walk away from the Federal Reserve System as a world central bank, a de facto world central bank. That is going to happen no matter what they do in Washington, D.C. And that will completely change the economic status of the United States in the world.
And it will change your status, folks. You, the masses. Listen up. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President today.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
I've got a vision for what I want to do for the country. See, I know exactly where I want to lead. It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Amazon.com. Just type in the search engine up there. at type in Edwin Vieira, Vieira, Vieira. His books will come up there. You can find his articles at newswithviews.com. Also on YouTube, a bunch of presentations Dr. Vieira has put out there over the years that, folks, it's up to you. It's up to you whether or not because when we have this currency reset or this reworking of the world's monetary system, the people in America are going to be, in abject poverty. Unless you're one of the 1%. And you've taken your money out and you've bought Chinese yuan. It's not going to be good. I mean, this is the things that start wars, isn't it?
Well, that's why we see what's been going on to a large extent in the Middle East, especially around Syria and this business in Ukraine. You turn an economic problem into a problem of foreign policy, and it's being directed now against Russia, and there's also some movement directed against the Chinese to put pressure on them one way or another, either to slow down what they're doing in terms of this brick reevaluation of the world economy, or maybe to force them back in some way into a more cooperative strategy with the Anglo-American financial bloc.
Right.
But I don't think any of that's going to work. I mean, if I were a Russian or a Chinese leader, I would say I have to be crazy to put myself back into a position of subservience to these people. Not to mention the fact that their system is collapsing. All right? I mean, even as an American, you look at the Federal Reserve System and say, well, this is going. All right? We can see this building coming down. We have to prepare some alternative. And this has nothing to do with, in a sense, with Republican or Democratic politics. It's simply this particular ship is sinking. Now, what's the alternative? Go down with it or get in some kind of a lifeboat? And this is an international problem, of course. But the international side of it is something we can't control unless we wanted to cooperate more with the Russians and the Chinese and say, well, okay, let's come to some understanding as to how we can do this in a rational fashion. But in terms of domestically, it is something we can control, theoretically, because this is a government of popular sovereignty. The people have the ultimate political authority. We don't need to be told, we don't want to be told, I should hope, what we're going to do in our own economic lives by a small group of elitists who have proven that their only interest is to enrich themselves at our expense.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is, you can forget the high-level political principles here. Don't read the Magna Carta. Don't read the Declaration of Independence. Don't read the Constitution. Just look at what's happened at Mr. and Mrs. America to what has occurred to you. What has happened to you in terms of your own domestic economy? Are you better off economically? Are you more secure financially in terms of your employment, in terms of your savings for retirement? Well, whatever metric, as they say, you want to use now than you were 10 years ago. And is it getting better or is it getting worse?
There's the question, folks. We throw that question out there to you. Are you doing better now than you were 10 years ago? Phone lines are open, 877-254-7524. Question, comment. We'll be right back after the news here on the American Freedom Network.
Now you can reach the American Freedom Network at our new P.O. Box 7.
Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product. Quality